Good afternoon, folks. Guess what? You've made it to the end of your week. Congratulations. I hope you have had a good week. And that, you're ready for the weekend. You're ready to go and chill out. And if you're working in retail, then I apologise. But hopefully I can try and get you through that as well. Because, retail sucks. And you shouldn't have to work over the weekend. But unfortunately, normies go to the shops over the weekends. Those are your busiest times. Trust me, I used to work in it. I know what you mean. If you like what I do, the subscribe button is right down below. Hit that, and if you do subscribe, make sure you hit the notification bell, because if you don't, then YouTube will not tell you that I'm here at all. They will just put you in a dark corner, and you'll never see me again, unfortunately. And if you have any problems, anything you need to go over in your own life, hobby, or otherwise, the Discord is down below. It is free. I say it every single time, so it goes into your brain. It's free. You don't need to sort anything out like that. You can just come on, have a little word with us, and everything's fine. The Patreon's down below as well if you really like what I do. And yeah, let's do some Hobby Nightmares. Now, as you know, on a Friday, we generally take all the Hobby Nightmares that haven't fit the theme that week. I don't tell you what the themes are, I just kind of do it myself in the office, so I know what I'm doing every week. But the ones that don't fit the theme, that are just thrown at me, like on a wall, see what sticks, I throw into the Hobby Nightmares on a Friday. So this is a big Hobby Nightmare compilation. I do not read these. Well, I do read these at the start of the week, but by the end of the week, I've forgotten them again. So, it is what it is. And there's a few of these that I just got today or yesterday that I've thrown in here just to make sure that they're read. If they're not read in this episode, they will be read in the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and so on. I will catch up. I'm doing 5 or 6, 7 Nightmares every single episode that we got on a Friday, so we will eventually catch up. But anyway, Andrew R says, oh, by the way, as I said last time, if you don't want me to read out your name, put it in the first line of the actual thing, right? Put it in the very first line. So I know exactly what I'm doing, exactly what I'm saying. And even in your name, if you want to, like even right before your name, just say, listen, don't use this as my name, fine. If you want me to describe your name a certain way or articulate your name a certain way, put that in there as well. Anyway, Andrew R says, forgive how long this is, mate, but it's a favourite of mine. I have edited it from time to time, and then I posted it. But this takes place in 2016 or so. And without further ado, I give you the tale of the peasants' rights movement. I have a funny feeling this is going to get heavy. When I was stationed in Germany, I had managed to gather a group of entirely composed of newcomers to not only Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the RPG line for Warhammer Fantasy, but Warhammer in general. Military guys, usually bored and have disposable income. Those ones were no different. Okay. One guy was in the IT section of the unit, played a deserting Bretonian man-at-arms in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and Khorne in Warhammer. Okay, cool. One guy had grown up on a farm in Arkansas, or something, and had never even played a video game before. We had invited him because we were friendly and thought it might be funny, and he, being lower ranked and generally a good dude, decided to jump in with us. He played an elf, but aside from that, was a good lad. Okay. Played HE in Warhammer, I don't know what HE is, but proxy WE for some units. Okay, less abbreviations, please. Tell me what you mean, and mean what you say. Because not everyone who's listening to these will know what the hell you're talking about, so... I don't know what, is it High Elves, is it, and Wood Elves? Okay, fine. But, no abbreviations, please. Tell me what you're saying. The third guy was an NCO, but was generally cool enough to hang out with. He was actually in the next room next to mine, and it was his girl that had been the crux this story is about. Our fourth guy was our original DM, who gave me the reins after deciding he wanted to play. Dude was like the guy from American Psycho, but without the crazy. Like, total, utter Chad. Best RP in the group by a mile. Okay. Don't be saying Patrick Bateman's a Chad. He's the biggest incel loser I think I've ever come across. Well, one of the biggest I've ever come across. If you read about what his inspirations were behind that character, you wouldn't say he's a Chad. This is a guy who has really big insecurities, makes people feel small around him because it makes his little dick feel massive, right? If you want Small Dick Energy, the movie, go watch American Psycho. I wouldn't describe him as a Chad, and this is something that's misdiagnosed a lot of the times. People who they assign chatty behaviour to people who are actually very weak and fragile and don't have what it takes to survive in the modern world and be men in the modern world, unfortunately. Yeah, that is something that I see happening a lot more. You see it happening with, like, young people misappropriate stuff. Like, remember when Che Guevara was on all these stupid t-shirts that people were wearing back in the day? And they still do, these fucking cringy left-wingers, right? They wear Che Guevara t-shirts and shit. Like that guy was borderline war criminal, and you're wearing his... Like, what are you doing? Like, and it's not even your culture. You know nothing about Che Guevara and what he went through and what he actually had to do. And, like, you don't know anything about him. So just stop wearing a t-shirt. Stop misappropriating something else to do something else. And the same with Patrick Bateman as well. A lot of people saying, oh, you know, he's what you should aspire to be, and you should, you know, make sure you don't take any shit from anybody. No, mate, he beats people up and kills people for the slightest little thing because he's powerless in other parts of his life. Most of the shit he gets up to in that movie that's terrible is all triggered by jealousy towards a co-worker. Yeah, don't be that guy. That's not a Chad. Anyway, lastly, we have the gent who was the single biggest source of RPG cringe, even despite the female detailed here. I have a ton of stories about him alone. Okay. 2 of them I've given thorough briefs on the setting for. 2 of them learnt as they went along, but still got a relatively brief explanation. Relative for me, that is, it was about 10 minutes. Okay, well, yeah, a 10-minute explanation's pretty good for a fantasy setting. Anyway, one week, that NCO, let's call him Chris, misses the session last minute. No fuss, we were military, shit comes up, and free time was precious. Next week, he knocks on my door and asks if it's okay if his girl comes. I'm always happy to teach and love when newcomers join, so I hand him the BRP for WFRP2E. Okay, this is what I mean. Stop the abbreviations, please. Like other people. They're really, really hard to read, and people don't get what you're talking about. If you want your story to hit and actually get people enthused, less abbreviations. Anyway, she comes to the next session, and it's what you might expect from an RPG horror story. Again, RPG is fine. Everyone knows what RPG is. She had pink/blue hair. Oh God. Wore horn-rimmed glasses. Whole shebang. It was super common for the military guys to date the local nationals, and that was the case here. At the time, I was less jaded, so I refrained from immediate cringe and happily rolled a character for her. She insisted she had already done it, but just made a name. She wanted an elf hunter or something mildly generic. Alright, fair enough. Yeah, first-timers usually go for generic stuff, that's fine. For the next few weeks, she shows, and there are many a cringe moment, but this is one in particular, was one that saw her quit the group outright. Okay. The group had, to the chagrin of the Bretonian deserter PC, ventured into Bretonnia itself thanks to a dubious offer from a petty noble. They travelled quite a ways, causing one village to raid another over a pig, before finally coming to rest in a Bretonian town. I forget which town it was. Gisro comes to mind, but it doesn't matter anyway. At this point, she asked me why they're all so poor. I explained that it's a feudal economy. Property rights are practically non-existent, and explained the concept of 10th share and the peasant's duty, part of Bretonia's law. Okay. She says, that's bullshit. I tell her that that's kind of the point, and she jokingly, quote-unquote, scolds the other party members for accepting work here. I start to answer somebody else's question, and she cuts back in and says, why don't they just simply withhold their production? Then the lords would have to come to the table and negotiate. Yeah, okay, right, this is a union member, of course. Of course, causing trouble for everybody else. My gut response was to blatantly shut her down. But I was trying to be friendly and explained why. She said, why don't the peasants just make enough money from their farms to buy their land from their lord? I tell her that's relatively feasible in the Empire and in the Wasteland, but not in Bretonnia. She says some shit under her breath like, wow, slaving for overlords who rob you of your dues? Sounds like capitalism. Expecting laughs. Which did come out more out of tension than anything. We progress a bit, And as the party is gathering information, she firmly says, I want to start talking to the peasants. Okay. I sense in my bones where this is going, but I comply. She walks up to a group of farmhands and starts grilling them about their workload, which of course they fucking hate, and starts with ye olde Marxist promises. A couple of the older peasants scoff, but the younger ones, of course, were quite enthralled by it. Brilliant GMing, brilliant DMing here, right? This is realistic. Just because you don't agree with communism, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have magnetic qualities to the young, and you've done a really good way of portraying that. Very well done, man. I mean, I assume you would be cast out of the table if you did the same thing for a right-wing party that we know about, but let's just move on, shall we? I had hoped that this small victory would satisfy her and she'd rejoin the party to find a fucking murderer or whatever, but this was a foolish miscalculation on my part. I only validated her. Yeah, here's the mistake, right? You did a really good job as a DM, but remember, this person's an SJW. Validation will only let them carry on and demand more and more and more and more until the whole thing creaks under its own weight. She does the cringy feel-good thing and steps onto a table where, of course, derided by much of the peasantry, which she would later call passive sexism, which I solicited feedback, and start shouting how they deserve the fruits of their labour, and that the peasantry united would and should stand before the nobility and other such BS. A couple of the yeomen in earshot suddenly leave, which the rest of the group understands as, uh-oh, time to go moment. She sees it as a challenge, and amps up the rhetoric. A couple of failed mass willpower tests later, and the crowd is overturning stalls and destroying produce. Wow. By the lady, a couple of peasants even stole horses. It got to the point where I seriously considered fudging rolls because the peasants failed tests after test to just fucking restrain themselves. I don't want things to derail too badly, but I don't like fudging rolls, but I thought to just buy them some time. An older gentleman comes up to the party and tells them, you know, what the fuck have you done? Best be gone now before our Lord comes to investigate. They begin to comply, the party I mean, but then the power of the femme... But then the power of the femme comes in, and her boyfriend simps for her, and convinces the party to stay and be good people, or what the fuck ever. Yeah, you're in Warhammer, man. There's no such thing. Bolt, go, run. She then tells one of the peasants, now thoroughly encouraged, to take a horse and ride to the Lord's manor and demand an audience. She is clearly very fucking proud of herself, a look so smug that an aura practically emanated from her. And something inside me just kind of broke, and I decided to run things as they would go in the law. Good for you, right? You've given her what she wanted. You've literally role played it completely right, and now the setting is coming back to bite her on the ass. For those unacquainted with Bretonnia. For those unacquainted with Bretonnia, or Warhammer lore, the nobility has such a stranglehold on society that, yes, unironically, Bretonnian lords take 90% of what the peasants produce. This is not an embellishment. The peasants keep a 10th share. The crimes a peasant may face capital punishment for are vast and hilariously benign, almost all of which involve the status quo and the preservation of the lord/peasant power dynamic. It is completely within reason in some provinces of Bretonnia for certain lords to outright execute peasants for simply being too near their purebred horse, or for not stepping aside to let the lord and retinue pass quick enough. There is some debate how oppressive the society is, as lore paints Bretonnia as comically massive, bloated and oppressive, replaced by a somewhat more noble, bright interpretation after, and then a more grim and bleak one in the end. But no matter what camp people fall in for preferred Bretonnia law, people know not to fuck with the nobility as a peasant in Bretonnia. So, when she doubles down, I pause and then simply say, okay, he's run off to fetch the Lord. You have a little bit of time to prepare. So they wait. She demands signs be put up, which fails because none of the peasants are literate. She made sure to tell me that she felt that was unrealistic. Oh, fuck yourself. Eventually, the marching of men-at-arms and the sound of hooves on cobblestones can be heard. She makes one more rallying speech to the crowd, and of course, now they fucking mass willpower check and stay put. The Lord arrives at the head of a column of knights of the realm and men-at-arms. She confidently walks up, smugly grins, and asks if she was as if she was a young adult novel protagonist, right? She says, "I take it my message reached you, O noble lord." He says, "Aye," and now he's reached you. And he fucking rolls the head of the peasant into the crowd. They are all shaken. The Lord abruptly states they all have one single chance at clemency. I realise this is being generous for a Bretonnian, but I did very much want to avoid derailing the campaign completely. Sensing his girl's plot fading, the guy who brought her has a brain-dead moment of desperation and hurls something like a potato at the fucking Lord and rolls a fucking 3. If you haven't played Warhammer Fantasy Battles role-playing, the lower the roll, the better, on a D100. He rolled a 3. The potato fucking explodes on the Lord's face. He wipes it off and says, "Very well, if you want to act like you are above my protection, then I will remind you why you need it." He basically forces the entire crowd to march into the field surrounding the town, lest he murder them on the spot. He wants to teach them exactly what the knights do to earn their 9 out of 10th share. They wager they don't have much of a choice. Many are still in a Mark's hammer further, and so want crude implements, and so they take what crude implements they have and march to the field. Everyone is looking back and forth at each other, unsure of what to say to her, so I finally pause and try to dissuade her out of character. I tell my players no, but I do... Sorry, I'm going to reread this bit because it's a bit choppy. Sometimes these longer stories, you can tell where somebody's taking a break and come back to it when they're a bit tired later on. But anyway, everyone is looking back and forth at each other, unsure of what to say to her, so I finally pause and try to dissuade her out of character. I never tell my players no, but I do warn them when something may not work out how they want. This time I told her straight up that people will die like this in this situation, and the town is likely fucked, but the party can slip out in the chaos. She frowns and says they were already dying this way anyway. Leftist to the end, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Wipes everybody up into a fervour, and then says, they were dying like this anyway, and leaves when the going gets tough. I look at the group, most of which are frowning. Her dude, of course, is happy as a clam. Maybe he's got one himself. The crowd has no sense of a formation. Once the party was formerly a mercenary, one of the party was formerly a mercenary, and he and man-at-arms deserter try their best to keep the crowd together, but the crowd literally cannot comprehend the orders they are being told. They are well and truly a rabble, and now are just jeering and optimistic now that they see the forces arrayed against them, and the fact that they are only like 200 in total in the Lord's cadre. So the Lord only has 200 men here. That number is a mix of knights of the realm and men-at-arms. Despite being peasants themselves, the men-at-arms know what the fuck the Lord is capable of, and have less than zero qualms about showing the peasant upstarts how to fight. So, our girl walks up and down the crowd like a Marxist braveheart, literally dropping words like proletariat, and I take one last look at her, just utterly happy with herself and this commie power fantasy, and all sense of pity I had evaporated. The Lord's clarion call is sounded, and the knights surge forward, whilst the men-at-arms march double quick. 2 of the players tell the mob to brace, and she fucking cuts them off and orders a charge. Oh no, screw this woman, man. Now the players are telling her off, and as they slip off into the charge, she unironically says some nonsense like, "The wrath of the worker is unstoppable," and beams like she just ended war for humankind. It was at this very moment when Bretonnian lancers ripped apart the peasants around her, showering her in viscera and mud. Doing some mass combat rules taken lightly from Warhammer Fantasy, A common solution we did for proper battles, something like 50 peasants just utterly fucking ruined on the charge, another 20 or so killed by the impact of hooves, just fucking beamed and crushed underfoot. And then, of course, most of the peasants rout and are just cut down by the knight as they try to flee. The peasants that pass their willpower checks try to rally, even as the knight blow past them, murdering their comrades and families. In time for our glorious leader's character to pass a willpower test and stand in front of the men-at-arms, thinking that the worst was over. At this point, the party actually split into two, and most ran to join the advancing men-at-arms. That's hilarious. Now, in comparison to the professional soldiers of the Empire, the stubborn warriors of the dwarfs, the martial prowess of the high elves, and the superhuman skill of the Chaos Warriors, Bretonnia men-at-arms may not seem like much. In their most recent army book, they are weapon skill 2. Lower was worse back then, which unironically is the same as the Skaven slaves and Tal warriors. Haha. But to those peasants, those men-at-arms may have well been Chaos chosen. They all had gambesons, swords, some even had polearms. I tried to give the peasants some kind of benefit for being in a mass group, but there was no way it would end well. Weapons fell on scramshawl tunics, as if it was Vermintide 3, Bretonian holiday, and she herself got shield bashed and stunned. The fighting stops for a moment, and the Lord's voice rings over the battlefield. The peasants are sobbing, many trying to understand just how grievously they were wounded, when the Lord offers his ultimate chance of clemency. You shouldn't, man, they should all be dead. But anyway, he says, You need not all die for some imperial tart. I love it. You need not all die for some imperial tart who believes herself a leader of men-in-arms. Surrender, and you will retain my protection and gain my forgiveness, with your dead taken home as a reminder of your lot and duty. Very fair, very fair. At this point, we all fully expect her to relent, to realise that you can't change the world, let alone the Warhammer world, with a college-level speech. Everyone takes a breath, glad it's over, and hoping they aren't personally implicated for this business, already discussing what favours to call on should the Lord arrest them. She interrupts with, No one answers to you, which is immediately protested by both the party and the peasants. Okay, the Lord had posted his knights on the flanks, and as she belted that out, the peasants and her character were ripped asunder by lances as if they were cut to ribbons by men-at-arms. She herself had her arm eviscerated thanks to a couple of critical hits, and bled out within the turn. By the time I looked up from the critical hit table, she was beside herself, and stormed off after ripping up her character sheet. Old boy ran out after her, and everyone else just went, wow, what the fuck, and laughed. Do you know what, this is a really good session. This is a really good session. I know it's like cringe as fuck, but it's really good. In summary, Warhammer Fantasy RPG is a good game system. This business aside, this was actually the best RPG/Warhammer group I'd ever had. We played up until I relocated to Japan a year later. We played weekly. They'd build Warhammer models during drawing, and we'd stop to go eat and come back to finish each session. Literally, some of the best RPGing I've ever had. These people would literally play until their characters were strong enough to represent in Warhammer proper, and then use them there, the RPG, to set up the narrative for their tabletop war games. Thanks for your videos and have a good one. That's probably one of the best role-playing stories I've ever read. That's really, really good. That's really good. I'm very happy about that one. That's 20 minutes of non-stop balls-to-the-wall comedy. I love it. Thank you. Right. Brewski says, Dear Exile, hello, my name is Brewski. Brewski, if you like the American slang for beer, and yes, that's my name. Been a lurker for quite a while on YouTube channel, and just jumped onto Discord. Well done making 10k subs, by the way. Cheers. Thank you very much, my friend. Anyway, I've got a different kind of story. Harking back to my beginning days of playing Warhammer 40,000 as a teenager, and I've not heard a ton of these in your videos, so thought this might make for an interesting read, and possibly a discussion. This is about parenting young gamers, and how parents handle situations with kids and new games. Now, I'm not currently a parent, and I'm not going to say I know absolutely everything about this family and their dynamics, But this father and son pair absolutely horrified me, and I swore I would never act that way if my children get into the hobby one day. Maybe I've got it entirely wrong, but I'm overly critical of the father here, but read on, and let me know what you think. I'm more interested to get some outside perspective than my own, and if I'm severely in the wrong, I'd rather know, and get that things right for my kids in the future. Thank you. Actual Chad behaviour, somebody making account for their own actions. Thank you very much. To set the scene, this was back in 1998, the good old days of 3rd edition 40k. A friend from school had introduced me to 40k at a friendly local game store called Adventurers Unleashed in Western New York. I had, very bravely, launched into the game with Eldar. Oh yeah, really, that's really brave in that edition. They were really powerful in 3rd, but only if you knew how to use them. And he says, if you remember them in 3rd, they were not a beginner-friendly army. No. By any means, no. My paint job was atrocious. I had no idea what to play or use, and we were all slogging in with the same attitude, just having fun, and it was a great time. We were all 12 to 13 years old, and fanatical about 40k. Our pocket change and spare time went exclusively to this game. One afternoon, there was a mega battle with about 20 players, and we were all absolutely pumped to play. Mind you, we had the smallest armies. I don't even remember them all, but I had about 20 Guardians, a D-cannon battery, a Farseer, a squad of Warp Spiders. This was totally a random army at this point. My friends had the same in Necrons, the White Dwarf or Metal versions, before these guys even had a codex. Space Wolves and Orcs. Anyway, these guys were happy to just let us play as the battle was a complete bloodbath anyway. There were many veterans there with thousands of points, and we were very impressed and humbled to be allowed in. On my side, and just to my left, was an even younger player, maybe 6 or 7 years old, also playing Eldar. He had another small army, but a little more than mine. A few tanks, several squads, etc. His father was one of the mega veterans, just to his left, playing several thousand points of Space Wolves. I bet you this guy's going to act like a douche. Who's taking bets? Most of the models were 2nd edition, so this guy had been around the block. Now, this kid was absolutely loving the game, and he knew some stuff. He could name his units, he could find them in the codex, sometimes he needed help pronouncing some rules, or names or remembering things, but he was in it. His dad seemed to be supportive, very pleased to have him there, helping him set up, etc. You could tell that the dad was handling all of the hobby side, as the paint jobs were similar skill-wise. The Eldar didn't look anything like mine, which at this point were like finger paintings. Here's where things get interesting. A turn or two in, the son would ask his dad about rules. At first, his dad was patient and would show his son what he was looking for or just answer his questions. But very rapidly, the dad would get frustrated with his son. Here we go. First, his tone changed and he would just get a bit short with his answers. And he wasn't smiling and laughing with his friends anymore. He was just getting more and more serious. I don't remember what over, but this guy was also getting into disagreements with an opposing veteran player, and it wasn't going in his favour. Yes, this sounds like a Space Wolf player. Sorry if you're a Space Wolf player. There are a lot of nice ones, but you know this is generally my experience. By now, his son was even coming to me somewhat to help out and show him how things in the Codex worked, and I at least could point out his units, what weapons they had, and what the tables were, etc. So this wasn't a big deal to me. Dad, however, didn't like this, and while he was at least polite with me, he would wrench back his son's codex and slam the rules in front of him, not amused. No, this has this gun. Start remembering this stuff, he would say. No, that rule doesn't work like that. First you roll this, then you roll that. No, stop. Here, I'll do it. Wow. This kind of sounds like, I'm going to be honest with you guys, right? And I've never said this before. Me and my own dad, as in this is Northern Exile talking, we don't get along. We haven't gotten along for a long, long time. In fact, the only reason why I didn't turn out like a complete piece of shit without a father figure is because I had several, right? I had my stepdad, I had my grandpa, my uncle, right? I had all these guys who are a lot stronger than my own dad, helping me out and dragging me through life. And, you know, my granddad taught me how to shave, you know, my uncle taught me how to, like, at least start talking to women. Shit like that, right? So things that you don't get, that you're supposed to get from your dad that I would never get. So I had other people step in and do that for me. Whereas this guy sounds just like my dad. This is exactly what my dad would act like. If he wanted me to do anything, like there were times where I would play on his PC because he wanted me to play the same games he did, and if I didn't get something, he would just smack the back of my chair and start shouting at me and pointing at the screen. I'm like 7, you know what I mean? And I'd just look at him like, you know, I'd fucking hate you. Like, I really hate you. And you really start to hate him at this point. What this guy is doing, he's poisoning not just the hobby, but himself in the eyes of his kid, which is terrible. He got so frustrated at one point that he started dictating what his son should do with his army, and when his son wanted to do something else, he got frustrated and moved the models and rolled the dice himself. I'm seeing this and really not having a comfortable time, despite enjoying the rest of the game. Yeah, dude, I'm really feeling really sorry for this kid. Now, I have to be somewhat fair in that I don't know it all, and I'm not a parent, and that maybe this was totally acceptable from another standpoint, but in retrospect, this kid wasn't acting like a toddler, running around trying to do everything but play the game. He was in there, trying and doing things more or less for himself at the start. As the game went on, he was still trying to play normally, but his dad was changing his moves mid-move, telling him what to do and berating him, etc. The son keeps playing and doesn't get discouraged. Wow, what a trooper, man. If there was a medal to give this kid, I would have, because at the end, his dad was absolutely pissed off, not reining it in, and was very frustrated at his son. And I'm going to great lengths here to point out this kid was not being typically a distracted, uninterested child. He wanted to play, and he wanted to learn. Wow. The dad, however, all I can do is shake my head. I'm guessing in retrospect that he was a rules lawyer and a power gamer, and whatever he was running into may have made it a shitty game for him. Fair enough. But when you have a young kid in the hobby and he has questions, I think you rein in any frustration and answer them with kindness, especially when he's your son. Yeah, okay, right. I'm. The rest of this is literally him just like talking about the story and then asking me for advice. So in the advance of time, thank you, Brewski, for your email. I'm gonna explain something. So when I was working with GW, my worst day was a Sunday when I was left to attend the store on my own. In terms of when I wasn't a store manager, I had many worse days after I was a store manager. But when I was running the store on my own, my manager wasn't there, my colleagues weren't there, it was just me, and I had to run this Sunday on my own. I had about 20 or 30 people in there, all asking me the same questions, all asking things at a million miles an hour. I did not know what to do. So in the end, I snapped at a kid when I didn't mean to. It was just like, I was literally answering 5 different questions, and he asked very politely a question, and I snapped at him how to do something, right? And I had to pull him aside. I said, listen, because I saw the look on his face, like seeing a Games Workshop employee, like, snap at him. He'd sort of, like, got really disheartened and was, like, still playing the game, but you could tell he was just holding it together. And I said, listen, man, can I have a word? And he said, yeah. He was about 11, 10 or 11. And he said, yeah, okay. And came over, and he literally thought he was going to get shouted at. And I just knelt down and said, listen, man, that's on me. Like, I didn't mean to snap at you there. I'm getting questions from several different places. You're playing like a badass. Like, you're literally owning it right now. And I never normally have to, answer questions for you. Wrong place, wrong time. I'm really sorry. Didn't mean that. Here, you're collecting Necrons. Have a Necron Overlord, right? I had a Necron Overlord from one of the box sets that we were doing for a display. I gave him the sprue. Said, here, have a Necron Overlord. There you go. And that was it, right? And he was like, oh, thank you. And that was it, right? So I just about saved that situation. But I still went home thinking I was a piece of shit, right? Because that's not how you speak to... That could have ruined his hobby. If I hadn't have caught that, if I hadn't have gone back to that kid, that could have been it. That could have been it. He could have just left the hobby. That could have been the end of it. He could have just said, fuck this. Right, I'm not doing this. I'm embarrassed. I feel small. Do not make kids feel small, man. That's not fair. Especially not in something like Warhammer. When they're getting the piss taken out of them in school for doing Warhammer anyway. Don't be a douche like this guy. And no, Brewski, you're completely in the right, mate. Don't treat your kids like this. Make sure that you're encouraging in the hobby. And if they're misbehaving, then yeah, maybe have the patience to say, listen, you need to prove to me that you're old enough to do this. And if you can't do that, then we won't play, right? That's what a good parent will do. But it seems like this kid wasn't even being the typical kid. He was actually trying, so this is even more heartbreaking. But thanks for your message, Bruce. I'm sorry I didn't read the rest of it, but it's literally I have read this one before, and yeah, you literally, we're going over the same points and asking where we're making our own points. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. And moving on to Remy, who says, "Greetings, Mr. Exile. Thank you for all you do, as I'm binge watching your videos and finally I joined the Discord. My name on there is Remy, so we'll use that for the story of disappointment from 3rd edition. Way back when Tau and Necrons had just become armies of their own, I found Warhammer 3rd edition. I've had a lot of Warhammer 3rd edition plays today. I lived in a tiny mountain town in North Carolina of 3,000 or so, and no one else there besides maybe 3 old guys played, so I never got much of an army besides some Nids, Tau, and a few sisters. Later in life, having moved and on my own, I came back, got a force of Tyranids together to play in 7th edition with all the detachment and crap we know plus loathe to hatred." What? Okay, it's another one of these that I'm going to have to translate halfway through. Been living in the Detroit area for a while, and my horror story was with all 3 local hobby stores, where literally no one would play against my Nids if I brought anything that flew. Ah, right, okay, so this is a part in the edition where flying things are an absolute nightmare. Even worse, many refused to play unless I foot slogged it across long tables, just getting shot to pieces every turn, and we were talking maybe 10 to 15 people on average who all just hated bugs, hated Tyranids. I never used anything flying, circus detachment, even though I owned 2 crones, 2 harpies, 4 flying tyrants and some 30 gargoyles, simply because I loved the models and a sea of shiny red wings look amazing. Inspired by the War of the Worlds movies, even using blood for the blood god on any fleshy parts. After a few months of wasting 2 or 3 days a week, I said screw it, and quit participating in the hobby entirely until last year, when I walked into one of those local stores. I enjoyed for some green stuff, as I had some eBay rescue orcs, and then I saw the Plastic Sisters. By the Emperor, they were glorious. Yeah, they are, aren't they? My heart sang as doves flew from behind me. Rays of light illuminated their section of shelves, which were quietly singing their hymns to his glory. With sisters, I have always loved their lore and models. Absolute nutcases who are nuns, with guns sprouting plays and songs of the Emperor. Truth be told, they were my second best loved faction after the Tyranids, and I walked out with a purgatory box and a stack of other kits. I have now been fully dragged back into enjoying the building, modelling and painting side, but having yet to play a single game, owning a few codexes but not the main rulebook. Hey, I admire my shelves of minis either way. Yeah, a lot of people are getting into the same parts of the hobby. Like, they're coming back. A lot of older guys are coming back and generally just being like, yeah, I love the hobby, but let's just play on this. You know, let me just take the parts of the hobby that I want and cut out everything else. I respect that completely, but I would say I don't have certain perceptions of the hobby. I don't have them be poisoned by certain bad actors. That's just really bad for the hobby going forwards in general. So if you can, make sure that you try and step outside of that and find the people that you want to play and model and paint with. That is 90% of what makes the hobby that it is, or makes it great. Okay? So, lastly, we are going with Sergeant Mystic Force, and he says, this is a shorter one, "Dear Mr. Exile, I have spent the day binge watching your content on 2 times all day whilst I clean my house. And I feel like you are a kindred spirit to some degree." Oh, thank you very much, man. Well, you're cleaning your house, so we're not that much of a kindred spirit. As a Brit who has lived in the US and leans similarly on the topic not to be mentioned, I think I am a normal, reasonably well-adjusted individual with a wife and children, with a professional job, and a few years older than you. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm hoping this might be an interesting question to ponder on. Anyway, how do you make friends in the hobby sphere? To me, the US is the land of acquaintances, where people seem to know more people, but have very few close connections. That is very true. When you go to a store or an event, you tend up talking to a few of the other outgoing people, but they already have enough people in their circles and don't need to collect any more. Alternatively, There are those who are more introverted, who take more work to engage with, and being similar to myself, find the whole thing rather draining to carry the burden on my own. I have recently moved to a new city in a new state, and would love to connect with more like-minded individuals. The thing is, I know there must be some other people like me in the same situation who would like to find some friends to regularly do stuff with, but how do you break down these barriers to get to that point? By the way, have you guys noticed how much better these read when I don't have to translate for you? And a lot of people are sending me emails saying, dude, do you even know how to read? Yes, I do. Thank you very much. But sometimes I have to translate for the person who sends it in when their message is all over the place. It does not help that my wife is one of those judgmental people who believes in the stereotypes, and the one time I did get a hobby friend, didn't hide her feelings. I ignored it anyway, but he eventually moved away for family reasons, and I have not had that since. Regards. Okay, so number one, with your wife, best thing to do is be open and honest, and say, look, this really bothers me. Please don't do that. These are grown men. Or show my channel. Like, you know, we've got lots of normal people on the channel. And I talk about the worst part of the hobby, but in the actual comment section, 9 times out of 10, it just brings out the best parts of the hobby when we do Hobby Nightmares. Everyone's here pulling in the same direction, right? Get the toxic out of the hobby and stop being man-children about things, right? Make sure that you talk to her, you make sure that you say, look, this bothers me. Please don't deride my hobby. You know, I don't sit there deriding you watching The Only Way is Essex or any of the other fucking shite that you watch on a daily basis, right? I don't deride you, so you shouldn't deride me. This is how I get my enjoyment out of life, and, you know, you deriding that takes away my enjoyment, because you're my wife, and your opinion matters to me. Word it like that, there's no way she can not go for it, man. Honestly. If she's a reasonable person, you'll be fine. Apart from that, in terms of the US, I lived in the Midwest, so everybody wanted to be your friend in the Midwest. Like, it was just like everybody wanted to know you, wanted to talk to you, wanted to hang out with you. You were swapping numbers all the time, so it was generally it was living life on easy mode when it comes to socializing. Like, you were able to just go out and get stuff. The hobby side of things was similar. Yeah, people were very open and you know, swapping numbers, getting games together, things like that. I would say, if you want to know what people are like in the US, wherever you are, go onto our Discord and go onto the Game Finder and put it in there where you are in the US and see if anyone wants to play a game with you. There will be somebody on there, I bet, who is either in the state you're in or the next state over, who would love to meet up and have a game. If you can't do that, online is always the best way to go about these things. Join Facebook groups, join Discord channels, join whatever you can to try and get your hobbyness out there. And the best thing to do from that standpoint is to not say anything for a while. Sit there and see what people say. Just analyse what people are doing and saying in the chat for a day or two. And then pipe up with something of your own, one of your own interests. If you really like the law, pose a law question. Things like that, right? And do it that way. And if no one's interested in responding to you, then maybe that place isn't for you. Move on and find another one. Eventually, you will find one that is quids in what you want. Thirdly, universities and colleges. Make sure, if you have one nearby, find out if they have a hobby group. And if they do, email them, get in touch and say, listen, I've just moved to the local area. No one's going to turn you away, man. That's not the kind of hobby we're in. And if they do, you didn't want to fucking play with those people anyway. The morons. So always, always, always make the first step. At the end of the day, out of the circle, I said this in his videos about the Horus Heresy, you're coming into their hobby space. You're coming into their world, right? They haven't come to invite you. You're coming into their world. So go in with humility and openness and just wanting to be a part of the hobby in their sphere. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, you'll be welcomed with open arms. And making acquaintances, I think you're putting far too much pressure on yourself, Mystic Force. I honestly think that you think that you're thinking from a very geeky standpoint and that all relationships are transactionary, right? Like, I've got to do this much effort and you've got to do that much effort and this is what we do. No. Stop thinking that way, right? If you can't fuck it or eat it, piss on it and walk away. That's literally... I go with the dog preamble, right? If I can't shag it or eat it, I'm not that bothered. And sometimes those two things are the same thing, right? I'm not that bothered about it. It's not going to affect my life. So I'll walk away. I'll just walk away, right? If it's not going to help me do one of those two things, eat or have sex, walk away. Just, and that's from a recently single guy's perspective. I'm not single anymore, but I was for a while. So yeah, that's the best thing to do. Stop putting pressure on all of your human relationships. Just go and be you, right? And if you want friends, Mystic Force, get them. Say, hey, this was cool. Do you mind swapping numbers so we can have another game sometime? Again, 9 times out of 10, that person's going to go, yeah, actually, I had a good time. Here's my number. Let's do it again. And there you go. And you're away. And you start talking and you start getting along with people, right? Take the pressure off of social interactions. They're not the be-all and end-all. And if you want friends, man, ask. Get them. That's all I can say. Ask and get them. And 9 times out of 10, I'm telling you now, if you had a good game with somebody, or you had a laugh with somebody, they're going to want to keep you around. They're not going to go, I'm sorry, my social circle is full at the moment. They're not going to fucking... Who says that? And if they do say that, fuck them. You didn't want to be friends with them anyway, because they're weird. So there you go, right? I mean, even a friendly person like me, if I've got loads of friends and I get one more, then, eventually if I talk to that person more and more and more, we'll end up being better and better friends. That's just how things go, right? It's normal human interaction, so take the pressure off of it. And if you want friends in the hobby, just get them. Ask, and they will come. Build it and they will come. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. That has been Hobby Nightmares for today. We're on 45 minutes, so I'm already going over time. I love you all a long time. Have a wonderful rest of your week. I will see you on Monday, or perhaps over the weekend if I'm not too busy on Sunday, but we'll see. Have a good one. See you later.